Thank you, Father David and Cops Metro for joining us today for SA News. Father David, I'm going to hand it off to you first. Talk to us a little bit about first, not only meeting the Holy Father once this year, but twice now, and about maybe a few things that he mentioned to you.
To sit down with the Pope for 1 hour with 15 people and him is an amazing experience because, I mean, people see the Pope when they come to St. Peter's, obviously, and thousands of people are in the piazza, and sometimes they go into St. Peter's for Mass, and there's several thousand in there. But to actually sit with him and engage with him in terms of back and forth, and he was so relaxed, and he was in a great mood, and he was very interested. He has a laser-like listening skill that he just, when you start talking, if you're the one talking, he's just zeroed in right on you, and he really listens, and you can tell how engaged he is. And he might make a comment, and there was different times during the meeting where we asked him to make comments, what do you think of what we're saying, or how would you look at this, or whatever. And he would jump in, great sense of humor, some really deep insights. And at the end of the whole hour, what lifted us all up was he said, you know what, you all do me a lot of good. And we just that's all we needed, to listen to that and to realize that. So I'm gonna toss it off to Josephine and Sonia for a while and see what they would like to say.
Why don't I give a little context to this visit? So I'm Josephine Lopez Paul. I'm the lead organizer with Cops Metro. And I was privileged to have come last year when the Holy Father invited us to come. This is the second visit, but the first was really kind of a curiosity of who we are and what we have together. The second visit, we've stayed in touch since the last year. He sent a beautiful video to Cops Metro for our convocation. And for us in the organization, it was incredible to come this time and ask him for his blessing on our work as we celebrate 50 years for another 50 years. And Sonia will talk more about that. This was also, Cops Metro is part of a network of organizations across the West and Southwest. So some of our sister organizations from California and Arizona, throughout Texas, were with us as well. And there were 15 of us that sat with the Holy Father for an hour.
One of the extraordinary things to me was he was there early. He got that. I mean, I'm used to sitting around and waiting for, the person we're going to speak with to come in. He was there early, and he stood and welcomed each one of us individually with a very warm welcome. And when we left, it was the same thing. It was hugs and handshakes. And, as Father David said, you do me a world of good. But he did us a world of good, and such an honor to be in his presence, let alone engage in a conversation with him. I mean, there was this back and forth, and he was funny, has a great sense of humor, and he kind of pushed back at us on some things. It was, as much as you try to prepare for a meeting like that, it's very difficult too, because as David said, he's a good listener, and he responds to what you're saying to him.
Father David, you mentioned his laser focus on everybody that's in the room. And then y'all mentioned as well that he greeted every single individual. And at the same time, he spoke to you and said that your work is atomic, that y'all work atom by atom, not atomic in the sense of blown out of proportion, but by individuals as well. So talk a little bit about how not only the work that you do is very based out of your experiences with others and not out of theory, like he said, but maybe also about the way that he conducts himself, doing the same thing, working with individuals and their experiences.
For him, obviously, we are doing a lot of good things, and everybody can do a lot of good things. I can help you because you're in need, and I helped you today, and maybe I helped you solve your problem, and that was good, and that was part of me being a Christian, and that was part of me loving you and God loving both of us, and that kind of thing. That can happen. But the way he was talking about that quote, that powerful quote that he gave us, was that little by little you send forth these ripples by all of these actions, and the ripples create what he said is a culture of solidarity. So individual actions are fantastic, but what he's trying to create in the church and in the world is a culture in which we recognize each other and we care for each other in the context that we are all one community, and that's what we're supposed to do. So it's this whole idea of, and he's been talking about this in all of his writings, his encyclicals, his apostolic exhortations, his talks, to create, that each one of us is called to create this culture around us where what we do affects others, and then we invite them to do things that affect us, and you create this synergy among everybody. That came across very, very much. I mean, he loved every story that we told, and we told concrete stories. This is what happened, Holy Father, and this is what we did, and this is how we work with people, and this is how the people spoke to us, and this is how the people learned how to take their voice and their community in their hands. And so we would go through these little stories, and he would really listen. But then the bigger picture was, okay, you are doing these things. We're all creating, and what you are symbolic of is creating this culture in which everybody begins to realize how much they are obligated to the community, and that everyone has a role and everyone is invited to do it.
What he said to us was, what you're doing is creating a culture. You're not looking to resolve things from one day to the next. Your resolve is to the idea of creating a culture. That's what I would emphasize. You are creating a culture of solidarity. And, you know, the amazing thing to me is how he got to the essence of what we do and the way he expressed it so beautifully. That it's piece by piece, but people working together, recognizing that there are differences, but not focusing on the differences, recognizing our commonality and using those to bind us together and to work together and to create this culture together. And, you know, as Josephine said, we'll be celebrating, Cops Metro is celebrating its 50th anniversary next year. And, you know, he was impressed by that. He was impressed that, you know, we've been doing this for many years, addressing many issues, and we were able to raise, you know, some of the issues and get his feedback on things like immigration, on things like climate change, which is dear to his heart and certainly to ours. So it was all of that, recognizing that it's not just about issues, and it is never about ideology, never.
Creating the culture, not only with the work you're doing, but with each other, with Cops Metro working closely with the Archdiocese of San Antonio, and now even the Catholic Church at large. Speak a little bit about the culture that's been created in this collaboration.
Synodality is relatively new to a lot of people, but Cops Metro has been practicing the practices of synodality for more than 50 years. And, you know, in reading the Pope, as he describes that we have to go to the peripheries, and he even said this yesterday, that we have to be pastoral to one another, and that we have to smell like the sheep when we lead people. And he gave this image of, like, sometimes in a flock of sheep, you're leading the pack. Sometimes you're in the middle of the pack because you smell, or because you're in and among. And then you're at the end sometimes because you're making sure that no one is lost. And those were the words he used to describe what we do. And he reemphasized with us the importance of going to the peripheries and reaching the people, you know, that are often not reached, and engaging them and walking with them, having an encounter and placing them and who they are and their needs kind of at the center of the church, if you will. And that is such a you know, it's a powerful metaphor for the work that we do, to go, you know, to the peripheries, to listen, to engage in synodality, but then to act on with others who are different than us on what we hear and care about together.
And we do. One of the things that we teach, and it's something that he's so good at, and that is listening. I mean, you're really not just stop from talking, but to, slow your mind down so that you're receptive to what the person is saying. And you're not thinking about the next thing you're going to say or how you're going to, already planning to react, but that you have to really be present to the people. And so the synodality process has been completely aligned with what we do, and has been, I think, a helpful tool in many of our parishes to help rebuild after the pandemic. So it's been a good tool, one that we really believe in, and one that, we'll not stop using it just because the process is over. But it's part and parcel of who we are.
Mm-hmm. And this is a really exciting time to be here, because it's, he just came back from Mongolia and he shared a bit about his visit there to visit 1,400 Catholics in the country. And then it's on the cusp of the Synod gathering that'll happen here in a couple of weeks. We also met with Sister Natalie Bacard, who's leading the Synod process, so she could hear from us. But one of the key things that came out of our conversation was around this idea of how we form clergy and lay leaders. And I want to ask Father David to share a bit about what he shared with the Pope related to that.
There was two of us that shared with the Pope about that. Both of us were priests. One was Father Ivan Motelongo. He's the judicial vicar of El Paso. And he was placed by Bishop Seitz in charge of the synodal process in that diocese. And really, he's a 3 years ordained. So, I call him a little poito priest, and yet he really, he had not really had much experience with community organizing and with this group called Episo, which has been the sister organization of COPS for many years, probably about 40 years. And he said they worked together so well, and he began to appreciate that for all these years, Episo and the community organizing network had been doing the work that now the church was called to do through the synod. And so he spoke about that process and how meaningful it was for him personally. And then I gave a little story about when I was a brand new priest at Immaculate Conception on the west side of San Antonio, very poor area. And I told the story of the fact that when I got there, there was this huge junkyard, illegal junkyard in front of the church across the street in the middle of the neighborhood. And it was there, of course, owned by a person who lived in another side of town in a very nice neighborhood. But he left all of his junk in our neighborhood. And it was illegal because he never had a permit. It was illegal because the fence around it, which is supposed to be kept in good repair, was falling down. It was illegal because it was filled with dangerous things like chemical barrels and old cars, and it was filled with weeds and snakes and rats, and it was horrible. And the kids played there. So I asked the people about it, and I told the Holy Father. The people said, well, we've written petitions to the city for 40 years, and no one pays attention because we are poor. And so that's, at the same time, this is when COPS was starting. And so we began the process of organizing by doing house meetings and listening to people and getting the people to listen to each other and talk, and they found their voice. And we began to bring city officials there. And the long and short of the story is that the park today, the junkyard today is a park, a community park. And I told the Holy Father, we did the day of dedication. There was a big mass, and we made a procession. We went across the street to dedicate the park. And I said, the key to that is, for me, I was transformed by the process, just like the community was transformed. And I said, the rest of my priesthood has been informed and influenced by that experience, but by the entire experience of what it is, how you organize a community and how you walk with that community and how you listen and train each other to listen, and you call forth the leaders. And I learned the iron rule, which has really, really helped a lot. And that is never do for somebody else what they can do for themselves. Those people could do it for themselves. They just needed the organizing process and a few little skills that they easily acquired and took over from there. So I simply said, for my priesthood now, which is a retired priesthood, I want to mentor the next generation of young clergy and seminarians, and hopefully have them understand all of this that affected me so much at the very, very beginning of my priesthood, and that influenced me for the rest of my life as a priest.
And it's all about the journey, like you were saying, journey with these communities to transform not only them, but to transform ourselves. And that seems to be also Pope Francis's vision for the Synod as well. Was there anything that he asked? I know Josephine and Sonia were speaking about some things that he challenged you on. Were there any call to actions that Pope Francis left you with as a final thought, maybe?
He actually did. I mean, we asked his advice on some of the issues that we described, and he basically told us, don't sit on your laurels. So we talked about victories, yeah, but don't sit on your laurels. There's so much more to do. Keep at it, keep doing it, keep working it. And that included, as I said, immigration, climate change, which is a part and parcel of his papacy, right? That's so incredibly important. Formation, housing, working with the elderly. I mean, all of those things. A lot of it was like, you're doing it, you're doing the right things, you know exactly what the right thing is to do, but you're not there. It was like, keep at it, keep working. So yeah, when you hear that from the Pope, you go, I'm in. No doubt. I will, we will. That's what we do.
And you invited him too?
I did. He talked about the importance of, the longevity of staying with things. So one of the things I did was to say, Holy Father, we've got the 50th anniversary coming up next year, and we'd like to invite you to come to join us for the 50th, not just to look back at what we've done in the last 50 years, but what we need to do together in the coming 50. So I think I took him aback a little bit when I said he wasn't exactly expecting it, but he was very gracious. He was very gracious.
And then at the end, we presented him with a gift as we're reflecting on these 50 years, a photo of our visit last year. And then at the bottom, there's a beautiful picture with then Bishop Flores and Pope Paul VI. And it was Pope Paul VI giving a blessing to cops. The cops button there, he's presenting him with one 50 years ago. And so we put that photo in there and with the phrase from Paul VI, if you want peace, work for justice. And he was very grateful.
He loved it. I mean, you could tell he really was pleased by it and got a big smile. Yeah.
So we're kind of speechless and numb still. It's the truth. Like, did that really happen?
Like,
twice?
Yeah. Josephine looked at me and said, "Can you believe that yesterday at this time we were with the Pope?" I go, really? We were? Yes, we were.
The other thing I wanted to add that he did ask specifically was he asked how were vocations going in the Archdiocese of San Antonio, and I told him, Holy Father, they're increasing. We have 23 seminarians, and that's an increase from last year. And he gave me like a thumbs up kind of, and it was a big smile, saying that he was very happy with that. I passed that information on to Bishop Gary Yannick, obviously, our vocation director, because he's done so much great work in encouraging vocations. And so I just want to let him know that the Pope got a personal report on what's going on in the Archdiocese with regard to vocations.
Excellent. And being an ex-seminarian myself here for the Archdiocese, that's great to hear that Pope Francis is happy about the numbers, but also to know that the culture of vocations here in the Archdiocese is one that's flourishing as well. Going back now to with what you mentioned about COPS Metro needing to move forward now and thinking about the next 50 years. What's next? What's next for COPS Metro and the Archdiocese of San Antonio?
Many, many unfinished business items that we have to take care of. Many. I mean, the issue of immigration is huge. How immigrants are treated in our state, in our city. Clearly, San Antonio is better than others, but not that great. There's so much to do. We talked about the issue of housing. Again, we're probably better than most, but right now we're working with the mayor and the city council on providing additional funds for housing for the Casiano homes that have been neglected for years and years.
Can I say one thing about that?
Absolutely.
We got an email that the COPS Metro leaders were at City Council yesterday, and they secured $1 million for some renovations at the Casianos. So shout out to St. Timothy's Parish, who was a big part of that.
So, the issues continue. I mean, the clean water, energy, and how, who's going to be included, who can pay their bills, who cannot. I mean, there's a lot of work to do. When you see what's happening in San Antonio ISD is releasing the number of schools that are likely to close. Well, guess what neighborhoods those are in? Guess where that is? When they talk about, the initial reaction of not allowing parents who don't have an ID, which if you're undocumented, you probably don't, they're not giving them access to schools or to their children during school hours. So, the issues go on and on. Workforce development, we're still very much deeply involved in that. When the pandemic was full blown, what people in our churches were saying was, I don't want a handout, I want a job. And so, we worked hard to get, ready to work past, and now we're continuing to work with the city till they get it right. There's a way to go on getting it right, making sure it has the needed effect on the economics of our communities, not just, certain areas of the city. So, our plate is full. There's a lot. And, there are always things that come up from the locals that we don't know about, that you have to pay attention to, because that's who we are. And that's where our work is.
Just that we're also focusing on rebuilding our congregations,
Definitely.
especially after the pandemic, and bringing people back in meaningful ways, having, small group conversations, identifying and training, developing leaders for the life of the parish, and growing. San Antonio is growing, and, we're recruiting new congregations for this type of human development as well.
I wanted Josephine to just say a few things about the relationship of Archbishop Gustavo with the organization.
We have been praying for him and asked him to pray for us as we came on this pilgrimage, and there is nobody more supportive for our organization and our work that we do than Archbishop Gustavo. And so, we carried him with us, and we have a special gift blessed by the Pope for him when we get back.